we have to clear something up here. Because there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of misdirection, and people just outright lying and trying to pass the buck and try to pass blame on what is about to occur on March 2nd, which is the GOP caucus. Now, look, I'm not here to necessarily be highly partisan, but let's face it. The things that we fight for on this program, the folks that we believe in, the liberty legislators, if you will, that come onto this program, they're all Republicans. So the Republican primary in this state is extremely important. This is a, quote, red state. And so when it comes to Republican issues, they have major ramifications and they matter. And this is legislative business. So I want to cover some things here. We've had Dorothy Moon, the chairwoman of the Idaho State Republican Party, on the program at least twice now to talk about the caucus that's happening March 2nd. And each time we do, and we've had other folks on, we talk about how we got into this situation. There have been mailers and hit pieces put out against Dorothy Moon, blaming her for disenfranchising deployed military folks, people who are infirmed or can't get out of the house when they go vote, for having no mail-in ballots because of this caucus that's happening. But what they're trying to do is gaslight you. And I need to correct the record. We need to go back to 2023 when House Bill 138 was presented. House Bill 138 was presented as being a bill that would eliminate the March election, thus saving the state money and removing the ability for school districts to keep running these levies over and over and over again. People were getting pretty tired of having to revote on levies and bonds every 6 months when they failed, or sometimes sooner than that. So they said that they were coming in to remove the March elections, which also contained the presidential primary. But I went and looked back at the bill, okay? And the bill was poorly written because it certainly did remove the primary, the presidential primary election. It removed the language from this bill. But if you see here, the statement of purpose on this bill specifically states that this legislation consolidation of the March presidential primary election, it seeks to consolidate the March presidential primary election with the May primary election, and put all primary elections will be held on the third Tuesday in May. So for the folks out there that were saying, well, no, this bill was just to eliminate the March elections for school districts, to hold levies, to get that under control. Well, in nowhere in the legislation does it talk about that. All it does is put lines through the presidential primary, which was the big mistake. This was the big mistake, that whoever wrote this bill, and some are saying that it came from Phil McGrain's office, the Secretary of State, that they went in and they just X'd out presidential primary throughout this entire bill. They just X'd it out, and they never fixed it. They never moved it. All they did was define what the elections were going to be in May, and thus ending the March election. So House Bill 138, all it did was remove exactly what the statement of purpose said it was going to do. And yet you got people out there going, no, this wasn't why we were doing it. But this is exactly why it was doing it. It says it right there. Representative Dustin Manwaring presented the bill, and Senator Mark Harris carried it in the Senate. Okay, so then that bill goes through, and then people notice, hey, if this bill gets signed, we're not going to have a presidential primary at all, because this legislation didn't do that. So then the Senate came along and said, okay, well, we'll have what they call a trailer bill. Let's have the governor sign that bill, and then we'll pass this next bill, which was Senate Bill 1186. And Senate Bill 1186 said, this bill follows the one we just went over, and it will put the presidential primary in May. Right? Well, the problem that everybody had with that was that by putting the presidential primary in May, it made Idaho completely irrelevant in Republicans and perhaps Democrats, but at least on the Republican schedule, it made it completely irrelevant to choosing the nominee for president. And it was so close to some deadlines that the National Party had that there was a risk that Idaho wouldn't even be able to send delegates. So having the primary in May was not an option for the Republican Party. And so they opposed this trailer bill because they did not want to see the Republican primary in May. They wanted it put back in March. And so that's what happened. And then this bill never went through. So after all that was known, guess what happened? The bill was sitting on Governor Little's desk. And after all of this happened, after everybody knew exactly what was going on, all he had to do was veto the bill. And then everything would have went back to normal. And we would have had a March primary for the president. We would have had everything would have stayed to normal. All he had to do was veto the bill. And then everybody in the legislature would have went like, "Oh, you're right. You're right." And we're guessing, we would assume we would have encouraged them to not override the veto. And then we wouldn't be in this mess. But you know what he did? After knowing all of that, after knowing everything that I explained to you, that if he signed this bill, the presidential primary was gone. It wouldn't go to May. It wouldn't go anywhere. It was gone. And so he signed it, knowing all of that. And the paper trail is there. The receipts are there. So what happened? Well, what happened? Well, Dorothy Moon said, well, we got to do a caucus. We got to do something to get this back. And then she worked with the party. There were other solutions to try and come back into session to bring the primary back, to do a special session, to pass a bill, to bring it in May, to bring it in March. But time ticked, and nobody got on board. Your legislature still didn't come back to do it. So the private party, the private Republican Party said, if the legislature's not going to fix this problem, then we're going to do the next best thing and hold a caucus. And that's the only thing that we can do, is hold a caucus. It won't cost us millions of dollars, and at least we'll have some say. And at least those who are able to attend the caucus will have some say. We feel bad. We feel badly that deployed veterans and folks that can't make it out of the House won't be able to make it. They won't be able to make it. But that problem lies squarely at the feet of Governor Little for signing that bill, and everybody else who encouraged him to do so, or whoever else was behind the scenes talking about that. So I am making that crystal clear exactly what happened. That's what happened. And so anybody out there getting mailers, getting stuff in the mail that says, oh, Dorothy Moon is screwing over people, is an absolute lie. Absolute lie. We should be thanking Dorothy Moon. If you're a Republican who's going to show up on March 2nd, we should be thanking Dorothy Moon. She's not a representative anymore. But we should be thanking Dorothy Moon and the party for working hard to make sure that Idaho has some sort of say in whatever level